What if I told you that one of the most celebrated women in Silicon Valley built a $9 billion company on a machine that never actually worked? For over a decade, the world believed Elizabeth Holmes had created something that would change medicine forever, a device that could run hundreds of tests with a single drop of blood. Investors lined up. Magazines called her the next Steve Jobs. She became the youngest self-made female billionaire in America. But behind the black turtlenecks, the deep voice and the perfect story, almost nothing was real. How does a company worth $9 billion just disappear? How do so many smart, powerful people fall for something this big? And how far was she willing to go to keep the lie alive? This is the full story of Theranos. It started in 2003. Elizabeth Holmes was 19 years old when she dropped out of Stanford University. She had an idea that sounded clean and ambitious: make blood testing faster, cheaper, and less painful. No more filling multiple vials from a vein in your arm, just a small finger prick. One drop of blood, hundreds of results. She named the company Theranos, a mix of therapy and diagnosis. The pitch was simple, the storytelling was not. Holmes had a rare ability to make people believe. She spoke with intensity. She described a future where people could test themselves at home or in a pharmacy and catch diseases early. Investors didn't just hear a business plan. They heard a mission. Within a few years, she had some of the most influential names in America paying attention. Holmes didn't only sell a product. She sold a carefully built image. She studied Steve Jobs. She started wearing black turtlenecks almost every day. She trained her voice to sound lower and more serious. Inside the company, she created a culture of intense secrecy. Employees signed strict agreements. Asking too many technical questions was dangerous. People who pushed too hard often found themselves out of a job, and for a long time the strategy worked. Theranos raised more than $700 million from high-profile investors. Rupert Murdoch put in money. The Walton family, owners of Walmart, invested. Betsy DeVos invested. Former secretaries of state and high-ranking military figures joined the board. The company looked untouchable. In 2013, Theranos signed a major partnership with Walgreens. The plan was to put Theranos blood testing centers inside thousands of pharmacies across the United States. The media loved the story. Holmes appeared on the cover of Fortune, Forbes, and Time. She was invited to speak at prestigious events. She was held up as proof that a young woman could dominate Silicon Valley. By 2014, the company reached a valuation of $9 billion. On paper, Elizabeth Holmes was worth $4.5 billion. She was the youngest self-made female billionaire in the country. From the outside, it looked like a perfect success story. A brilliant founder, a revolutionary product, a company changing healthcare. Inside the walls of Theranos, the reality was very different. The core technology, a device called the Edison, could not do what the company claimed. It struggled to produce accurate and reliable results for most of the tests. In many situations, Theranos was quietly using traditional blood analyzers made by other companies. The results were then presented as if they had come from their own revolutionary machine. Demonstrations for investors and partners were carefully controlled. Data was adjusted. Problems were hidden. Employees who noticed the gaps and tried to raise concerns faced pressure. Some were fired. Others were reminded of the legal agreements they had signed. The message was clear. Loyalty mattered more than accuracy. Meanwhile, real people were affected. Patients received test results that were wrong. Some were told they had conditions they did not have. Others were given normal results when something was actually wrong. In a field like blood testing, those mistakes are not small. The internal culture grew heavier. Fear and control replaced open scientific discussion. Holmes and her partner at the time, Sunny Balwani, kept tight authority over information. Questioning the technology was treated as disloyalty to the mission. The gap between the public story and the private reality kept growing. For years, the company managed to keep it from collapsing. Then, in 2015, the Wall Street Journal began investigating. Reporter John Carreyrou started talking to former employees. What he uncovered would change everything. Once the first serious cracks appeared in public, the collapse came quickly. The journal's reporting exposed the problems with the technology and the way the company had operated. Regulators stepped in. The Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services investigated and eventually banned Holmes from operating a blood testing laboratory for 2 years. Walgreens ended the partnership. Investors who had once competed to fund Theranos now wanted explanations. The media narrative flipped almost overnight. Holmes tried to push back. She denied the most serious claims. She suggested that forces were trying to stop innovation. For a short period, some supporters still defended her, but the evidence continued to stack up. In 2018, Theranos shut down completely. The $9 billion valuation fell to zero. Hundreds of employees lost their jobs. Investors lost hundreds of millions of dollars. Criminal charges followed. Elizabeth Holmes and Sunny Balwani were both charged with fraud. After a long trial that received national attention, Holmes was convicted on multiple counts. In November 2022, she was sentenced to more than 11 years in federal prison. She began serving her sentence in 2023. The woman who had once been compared to Steve Jobs was now a convicted felon. Theranos was never only a story about a failed machine. It was a story about belief, image, and how far a powerful narrative can go before reality intervenes. Holmes understood something that still matters in Silicon Valley and beyond. A compelling story can sometimes outweigh the need for proof. She sold a clean, inspiring vision so effectively that many smart people stopped asking hard questions. Investors, partners, journalists, and board members all wanted the story to be true. For more than a decade, that was enough to keep the company alive. The fall of Theranos remains one of the sharpest warnings of the last 20 years. When the story becomes more important than the evidence, the ending is rarely gentle. This was not just a business that failed. It was a $9 billion illusion that finally ran out of time.